Welcome back to Spillin' Tea with Tommy B. I'm your host, Tommy Byers. I am joined by Director of the Powderhorn, Jeremy Hawa. Jeremy, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
And so the Powderhorn is a Western. That's kind of a genre that's kind of faded away. I remember growing up, going to my grandparents and watching Westerns. But as we've kind of mentioned, that's a genre that's making its way back.
Absolutely. It's a genre that is really kind of finding, a resurgence. We're seeing a lot of that, the popularity of shows like Yellowstone in 1883 and 1923. And Taylor Sheridan, who's the writer-director of that, he's almost single-handedly, to a degree, really brought back the Western genre. But it's a genre that my entire life I've always been extremely dedicated to.
And we know a lot of times when you think of old Westerns, you think of cowboys versus Indians, but a lot of times it has that sentimental family value. We talked about Shane, and at the end of it, the little boy is saying, "Come back, Shane,
Absolutely.
Shane." And so what kind of impact did the Westerns play on you?
Well, first of all, I think like so many young men, at the time that I grew up, they established role models in your life. The cowboys were our heroes. But as I became a filmmaker and I became a screenwriter, and you start thinking about content and you think about things that are relevant culturally, and what are we as Americans, what do we value, what's going to resonate with audiences, and it all of us have always been drawn back to the Western, predominantly because that is our defining American mythos. If you were to go to the UK, if you're to go to, European countries, you have knights in shining armor, and you've got Arthurian legend, and you've got all of these things. Well, what we have as a culture are our Westerns, that so iconic of our, the ideals that we have of American independence and freedom and those things. And yeah, traditionally, historically with the American Western, there were certain types of stories that were being told. Like you said, Shane is probably one of the top ones I can think of as an historic Western, or The Searchers with John Wayne. But the resurgence really started happening because the Western was really experiencing a slow death through the early 80s into the early 90s. And I think the film Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood allowed filmmakers to understand that you can redefine the Western, that you can tell a different type of story, in that case, examining the whole idea of violence, whether it's justified or not. And it was something that it was a Western told in a way we'd never seen it before. And I think that always resounded with me to the sense that there's so much story left to tell, and it's just a genre like anything else. So many things that are culturally relevant in the modern era can be told and examined inside the shell of the Western genre. For example, you think of films like Django and things like that, examine racism and things like that. So I think there's still a lot of life left in the Western, and I want to be a part of that.
And how does your new film really bring that new life and that legendary tale of the Western to the modern time?
Well, to a degree, it's a bit of a mixed genre. It is a Western, but it's a thriller, a dark thriller as well. And so I like the mix of that. Like, mixed genres have always been something I've been a huge fan of, where you're mixing, whether it's, action comedy or, like, horror, sci-fi, different things like that. And a Western, I think, is one of those things that you can mix well with other genres. And that was one of my goals in this. So I took the story of a historic South Texas legend that evolved into a very famous South Texas ghost story that's still told to this day, and examined that. And I was like, can I really tell a solid story, something that's not apologetic or tongue-in-cheek, but just try to tell a straight Western with, horror elements in it? And I think it worked out well.
And we talked earlier a little bit, real quick, about sound stages versus real natural livestock areas or natural earth. And Westerns really help penetrate the naturality and the beauty of America.
Absolutely. I think anytime you shoot a Western, you're almost, you can almost expect to be on location. And so, not just for the audience, but for the actors that are in it, for the crew that's in it, it just invests you in that story. It puts you in that world. just like we're on a sound stage today. As soon as we walk off, we're back in the real world. Well, when you're out on location, you're on location and you're there. And for a lot of the, most of the time, you're in that environment. So I think it brings a real level of authenticity on all levels of production. So.
Well, I can't wait to watch it. I know our viewers can't wait to watch the Powderhorn. And I want to say thank you once again for joining us today. And thank you for watching this episode of Spilling Tea with Tommy B. To see more content from LUTV News, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.